Welcome to the 5th session on becoming a mission-shaped church. Last week we thought about mission as evangelism. We thought about mission as healing. We thought about mission and fear and how fear stops us from doing the things that God's called us to. We've thought about the Missio Dei and how mission flows from God. He's the author of mission. And we as the church, as the people of God, are invited to join him in what he's doing, and we need to learn to listen to God's Spirit. And today we think about mission as incarnation. The word incarnation comes from the Latin incarnate, of the flesh. And if Matthew 28, that last chapter in Matthew's Gospel, the Great Commission, was the impetus for mission in the 19th century, then John 20, verses 21 to 22, have been really important to recent understandings of mission. It says, as he spoke, he showed them the wounds of his hands and of his side, and they were filled with joy when they saw the Lord again. And he said to them, "Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, so I am sending you." The intimate relationship between the Father and the Son in John's Gospel is a paradigm for mission. It was how the disciples were to do mission. The Spirit of Jesus would guide them and direct them. So that we see mission as incarnation finds itself rooted in Jesus' own incarnation. John 1 verse 14 reads, "And he tabernacled," it's literally he tabernacled amongst us. He made his home amongst us, his dwelling. His tent was pitched here on earth. Word became flesh is the most profound expression of the incarnation, because it's involved, it's costly, it's time consuming, it's extremely inconvenient. Yet incarnational ministry is for all of us, because it involves a posture of learning, of submission, of humility. Yet it breeds great power and authority. Mission as incarnation takes culture and context very seriously. It takes language and entering into a culture seriously. Let me give you an example. For a number of years I lived in Cambodia, and learning a language that has a different script and lots of complicated consonants and ways of constructing sentences, your brain often is hurting. Often I would learn to say something and say it completely wrongly. For example, if you want to say, "I worship God," you have to say, "Knyom twai bong kun pre ong." But it's easy to say this, "Knyom twai bong kun pre ong," which means, "I worship the toilet of God." As you can see, it means you get in a lot of scrapes. Jesus' ministry was a ministry of discipleship in many ways. He had a group of 12 men that he gathered around him. They were supported by a network of women and others. It was a difficult task. They were doing an apprenticeship with Jesus. Jesus' disciples learnt on the job. They were learning in the rough and tumble of life. Jesus often felt let down by his disciples. They frequently misunderstood his teaching, his parables, and he had to take them to one side to explain things more clearly. But Jesus' posture of submission and humility towards the Father in his ministry is exceptional. Paul says, "I pour out my life like a drink offering." The incarnation is a reminder to us of the depth and the cost of Christ's ministry. He made his home amongst us. He understood us. He wept with us. He laughed with us. As the Father sent me into the world, he says, I am sending you. That's what he requires of us as we do mission-shaped ministry. To be in the world but not of it. To love the unlovely. To make every effort to understand the culture and the context of the people that we're trying to reach. Sometimes that will be radically different. Sometimes it will mean making a small shift. As incarnation, challenges us to reimagine the gospel in whatever context we find ourselves. The techniques and the methods of a previous generation will not necessarily be as effective in an increasingly secular, post-apartheid, post-Christendom generation. We are becoming increasingly materialistic in all cultures across South Africa, whether white, black, coloured, whatever you are. And we have to find ways of being incarnational, of showing people that there's an alternative to living under the cloud, under the authority of materialism, and saying that there's a new way to serve Jesus. But we've got to show people in an incarnational way what that looks like. In the history of Christian mission, there have been men and women who have given up their status, their power, their authority, their lifestyle in order to travel great distances, to learn a new language, to learn a new culture, to translate God's word into a new language, so that a whole group of people, a whole ethne, could come to saving faith in Jesus Christ. And the same remains for us, that we need to find ways to reach out to another generation, to a culture that's in transition and change. And the question remains is how we're going to do that. We've got to be prepared to take some risks and to do things in new ways.